The energy industry is at a crossroads, but what might the future look like? I'm Ed Reed, the editor of E-FWD, and I caught up with a number of E-FWD members at the recent Offshore Europe show in Aberdeen to get a bit of a steer. The industry's working out how to come to terms with the transition, as the government and politicians more broadly consider how growing the energy sector can align with its efforts to tackle emissions. It's hard to escape mention of the windfall tax, but it's becoming increasingly clear that as a means to raise revenue, it's woefully underperformed. What it has delivered is a choke point for investment in the North Sea, complicated by other areas such as the new licence ban and the various court cases around emissions. It was actually remarkable that, given these challenges, how optimistic people we spoke to were. Part of this is a necessity. It's ultimately an indulgence to simply complain about what's wrong with the world or the government. Industry needs to look forward and focus on how to try and find solutions. I always enjoyed my time in Aberdeen, and offshore Europe was no different. Part of the fascination for me is the importance of energy to the city. In other parts of the country, the energy industry can sometimes feel a bit abstract. In Aberdeen, though, everyone knows people in the industry, and everyone has an opinion. We will continue to need oil and gas right up until 2050 and beyond, even while staying on track for net zero. And we're going to need the skills and the people for our existing hydrocarbon supply system while layering on low emission technologies. As the energy transition takes shape, workers will be crucial to keeping the lights on and the economy running. It often feels like oil and gas workers, especially in the offshore, are taken for granted, and that's at odds with those workers in other more onshore areas. And there are certainly risks to the workforce that go right to the top of how we as a country are planning for the energy sector. Michael Love from Apito explained.
So we have done a lot of work recently with our partners, the likes of the Chamber of Commerce, OE UK, to really try and understand and link people, place, industry, business, all these core pillars to the industrial strategy and make sure that before that was published, it reflected a lot of what we feel needed to be included. We are concerned, I think, Ed, in honest terms, that we risk offshoring our workforce, our supply chain.
And that sense of industrial clarity also came through in conversations with Paula Patterson at Fidders Oak.
We look around us and it's very, very mechanical. Right at the heart of what we do is people. And there's that uncertainty has an impact on people. So there's conversations about the decline in the oil and gas industry and the move into renewable energies and the transition into that. But there's no sense of what a plan is. There's no sense of when one turns off and one turns on or what that transition really looks like. So if I'm a person working in oil and gas currently, I'm wondering what's next for me and where my skills get to be used.
Part of that answer has to come from executives, but this can be a challenge, Jill Hughes from Affinity explained. Those who have become CEOs or CFOs or other acronyms beginning with C may not always be the best at transmitting a message with workers, she said.
The leaders need to be able to think about their people, what their people will connect with, and use the right language that's going to help people to understand what it is that they're really trying to achieve in the big picture of change. We've got people in organisations that are CFOs or CEOs. They're absolutely amazing at what they do, but they're not always amazing at getting the messages quite right or talking to their people in that direct way that's going to make a big difference. They need to just remember that the people are what will make the change happen and what will make the change stick. So don't forget about them in the grand scheme of things.
But the energy industry is unlike many other industries in the sense that it's not always straightforward. Contractors need to be able to make choices about the future and in terms of things like paying for training courses, while not maybe being privy to the top line direction that those C-suiters have. Ian Taylor from Chorus said the challenge for the workforce lies in trying to find a way through the thicket of regulations and opportunities.
We're quite interested in the infrastructure that happens in between all of the above, and I think that's where the workforce challenges will happen specifically. I don't think it will be in any one bucket specifically. I think the workforce of the future, I think the workforce tend not to look at themselves in the categories to which they are assigned from a view from above. I think people tend to base their skill set based on their vocation. So I think we'll see a lot more transitional workers. I think there'll be a lot more requirement for people to look objectively about the skills they have in their workforce and how ready they are to adapt to quite a changing energy environment.
As always, it's hard to escape from the discussion of AI and to what extent workers are ready for this change. Jill Hughes went on to say AI was going to play a big role in digital transformation and call for people to show flexibility in how to deliver it.
I think the level of change that's happening in that area is so significant. The pace is so great at the moment. Being able to put a roadmap in place that's going to help you to adapt, but it needs to be that agile roadmap. So don't think about things that are 5 years away. Think about things that are 5 months away, and being able to be evolving constantly with that change, because the change is happening at such a pace around us right now.
That pace of change clearly varies. Some are moving fast, but as Ian Taylor explained, some are not.
Digital awareness and willingness to adopt is still quite low. I think we spoke last night about a scenario where I've just been asked to print off an Excel sheet and sign it and then scan it back in and send it. So digitization is still not fully fledged, partly because what the requirements a lot of high hazard industries have are there's no margin for error. You physically can't get it wrong. So adoption is slower. I think there is an appetite to do it, but I think the pace of change in technology really mandates that we need to look at subjectively, and the challenges that industry faces, our customers face, are one that can't be solved quickly or without the use of supporting technologies like AI.
It is a challenge for workers to position themselves individually, but to be fair, the wider industry is also coming to grips with how it needs to tackle a more complicated transition. In 2020 and 2021, the oil industry was on its knees, and it really seemed like it could be the end of hydrocarbons. All that was needed, the thinking was at the time, was for a light push, and the edifice of oil and gas would crumble. Looking back now, that sense massively simplified the challenge that was ahead for society. Sometimes, though, it feels like the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero is stuck with that same thinking. Industry has moved on to try and find a way to reconcile meeting current and future oil and gas demand, with this major shift into solar, wind, CCS, hydrogen, and all these other parts of an integrated energy system with which we must grapple. Steve Swindell, the outgoing head of Exodus, highlighted that need to make the case to politicians. It's about the necessity of oil and gas to deliver on the energy transition goals, he said.
I think the thing that I picked up on most was it's about and. It's oil and gas and wind and hydrogen and storage. That's what we're talking about here. And everybody's agreeing, and everybody's saying we shouldn't be having the polarized debate is not helping. The interesting thing about the politicians and the politics, they're actually making it a polarized debate when I don't think it needs to be. You can achieve the climate goals, we can achieve clean energy by 2030, and still produce oil and gas to do that. In fact, it's necessary to produce oil and gas to achieve those goals. And you turn that into a positive rather than this is bad and that's good. I think that's the challenge that the politicians have.
And there are some signs of progress from government, particularly around supporting CCS clusters. DESNZ has signed up to support 2 in the northeast and northwest, with £21.7 billion worth of funding. Going a step further, the National Wealth Fund has stepped in to provide earlier stage funding for the Peak Cluster, Gavin Roberts of Spirit Energy explained.
Listen, that's fantastic recognition, I'll say. So the National Wealth Fund, previously the UK Investment Bank, the National Wealth Fund recently announced a commitment to invest in the Peak Cluster side of it, so the pipeline side of it, something in the region of around £30 million. Now, the interesting thing there is that makes our project the only project at this stage in the UK that has government investment going into it in that kind. Again, this isn't a grant, this isn't a subsidy, this is an investment. The National Wealth Fund expects to get a payback from this, and how will the public benefit? Well, that's how they'll benefit from it as well. So that's a really important step, and I would expect, and we would invite and encourage and look forward to further similar announcements of investment into those sorts of projects. I think that's how we help make people understand how important these projects are, that they can be a value creator. There's a general conception that CCS is just cost, that all CCS projects will require enormous amounts of public subsidy. Now, the reality is, when you have a newer industry such as CCS, because the technology is not new, but what we want to do at scale, yes, that's new, that's going to be challenging, and all such new industries require support from government to an extent, but not all CCS projects require the same sort of support. Certainly our project doesn't.
Gavin went on to say Morecambe Net Zero would pay out around £7 billion over its project life to the Treasury. And while there's a clear benefit to the government from those revenues, there are also the more diffuse benefits. The plan aims to capitalise on private investment of around £5 billion for the project, which should unlock around £10 billion of inward investment. And that plan's also going to help safeguard existing traditional jobs in areas such as cement production that would otherwise struggle with carbon emissions. Spirit expects that around 13,000 jobs will benefit as a result of its project, with more in the supply chain. And jobs are front and centre for ProServe also, both in existing industries and new opportunities, Dan Fernley told me.
We're keeping our conventional heritage, our conventional energy heritage, because there's still a lot to do in that space. The life extension, even the decommissioning. We play in all facets of that energy space. So we're continuing to do that, but our globalization is a big part of that as well. Aberdeen has an amazing skill set and people and heritage and industry. And the capabilities, especially in the supply chain. It's been here for a long time. My family came from this industry. I'm in this industry, so it's quite personal to me. And what we do is we push that expertise out to the world. We have people in Aberdeen going out to West Africa. We have them supporting some of our more technical problems in Southeast Asia. And it works well for us now, but it's, servicing the world from UK becomes more and more expensive. Yeah. So it's a consideration that we continue to follow, adapt, and we'll see where we are in the next sort of 5 to 10 years as everyone's looking at.
There's a complexity to the energy industry that is easy to overlook. Speaking to people around Aberdeen, the intermingling of supply chains between the offshore wind and oil and gas and CCS industries is abundantly clear. The message comes through again and again about how damaging the oil industry has a knock-on impact on plans to ramp up our low-carbon plans. It's also clear the industry is facing up to its responsibilities. It's trying to find a way through the challenges of operating in the UK alongside those commercial and practical needs. The way forwards is integration, but where there is integration, there is a need to recognise complexity. Aberdeen's moved on from the notion of a clean break with hydrocarbons. New energies are simply not delivering at the speed required, and headwinds facing these new industries, such as high interest rates, equipment bottlenecks, and deglobalisation, are slowing these developments down. No one I spoke to denied the need to tackle the UK's emissions problem, but there's a clear sense we cannot tackle net zero on its own. We must also think of how to deliver for society. People may struggle to see the immediate impact of climate change, but will be well aware of inflation and job losses. For E-FWD members, this presents both a challenge and an opportunity. The industry needs to maintain its technical leadership while developing new capabilities. Companies that can successfully integrate existing expertise with emerging technologies while keeping their workforce engaged and skilled will be best positioned to thrive. But this requires a long-term view, and investment in both infrastructure and people, something that our members, with a deep understanding of the energy sector's complexities, are uniquely positioned to deliver. And if you want to hear more, you can listen and watch the full interviews from all of our members on the E-FWD YouTube channel. I've been Ed Reed, editor of E-FWD, where we're always pushing the conversation forward.